Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 835 for the 6th of October 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia. Before we start today's show, a big congratulations to my friend and colleague Brian Dunning at the Skeptoid podcast. Skeptoid is celebrating 18 years. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe celebrating 1,000 shows. Well, Brian is certainly up there with 18 years of the Skeptoid podcast. And if you haven't heard the latest episode, it's sort of a retrospective of some of his favourite episodes over the past 18 years. Well worth listening to. And I'm looking forward to seeing Brian and the Skeptoid team in Las Vegas at SciCon coming up later in October, and I'm sure to be bringing you lots of reports from there. But don't forget the Skepticon XL this year in Sydney, Australia, and you can get your tickets at skepticon.org.au. What a lineup, including Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki, Robin Williams, Alanta Colley all the way from Melbourne, Sue Irachi with some interesting insights into quackery, and of course, the one and only Ben Radford, the international man of mystery. Well, he investigates international mysteries, especially when it comes to urban legends and cryptozoology. And don't forget, if you head to skepticon.org.au to buy your tickets, at the same time you can download the PDF flyer poster for the convention. And if you're in the Sydney area, we would certainly appreciate if you simply print that out and stick it up somewhere. But coming up on this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Black Salve, one of the most quackery of quack products, one of the most quack of quackery products, one of the hallmarks, one of the poster kids of quackery, this dangerous goop. I wonder if I can get in trouble for saying that. This dangerous concoction said to cure cancers and other skin conditions when in reality it eats the flesh away. A horrible substance promoted by quacks and people who really don't think things through very thoroughly. Find out what we mean with our story on Black Salve coming up at the top of the show. Following that, it's Adrienne Hill, our reporter from Canada, from Calgary, Canada, because we have two reporters in Canada, one from Edmonton, Kat McLeod, and Adrienne in Calgary. She's going to be talking to Erika Englehaupt about her books. Now, Erika is a science journalist, and her books have been published in the last few years. And this is part one of an interview with Erika, in which Erika and Adrienne, apart from anything else, will discuss the book Gory Details, Adventures from the Dark Side of Science. And you'll hear her very strong views on the way that females, when it comes to anatomy, medicine, treatment, have, they've been left out in the cold a little bit over the years. Then to round off the show, it's back to the Trove archives, where we'll look at part two of our series of psychic investigations from Australia's print history, including items from 1947, 1934, and 1984. Now, here's some interesting news for you people who are up to date in your technology. Well, I don't know. TikTok. How up to date is that? Sort of, a bit. I wonder what will come along next. Anyway, currently, TikTok is the new kid on the block, and the Australian skeptics have a TikTok channel. Just opened. Do you open a new channel on TikTok? Just created. And if you go there with links in this week's show notes, you can see the first two TikToks put up, and they are promoting the convention, the Skepticon. We have Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki, and Atlanta Collie, and over the coming week or so we'll have lots more, including Dr. Sue Urachi, myself, Tim Mendham, and of course the one and only Ben Radford. Check out the Australian Skeptics TikTok. I wonder what else will appear there over the coming months. A big shout out to those people enjoying their break at the moment, their holiday here in various parts of Australia. And I wonder if you have received any visitors to show around, especially family from overseas. That's always a pleasure. But now it's time for me to run downstairs. Ooh, what will I have? Some ginger tea. Quite partial to ginger tea. Well, it's not really tea, is it? It's a gingery drink. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Remember last week on the Skeptic Zone in the Trove segment, we quoted a story by the late and very much missed reporter Jane Hansen, who only died a matter of a month or two ago. And the story dated from 2013 in the Daily Telegraph. And just to refresh your memory, she writes, anti-vaccination group the AVN, Australian Vaccination Network, as they were known in those days, they're now called, after various name changes, they're now called the Australian Vaccinations or Vaccination Risks Network, is engulfed in a fresh controversy with the Therapeutics Goods Administration by promoting a cancer cure that medical experts say is dangerous. Now, this product is called Black Salve or Black Salve, depending on how you pronounce it, and it's a mixture of corrosive compounds. The claim is it can be used for various skin conditions, especially skin cancers. It will dissolve, it will eat away the cancers. She goes on to say the ad proclaimed Black Salve, I'll pronounce it salve, as a, quote, safe, effective natural remedy used for over 2,000 years to treat skin cancers and other cancerous conditions, leading to a total remission of the disease, end quote. Now here's the bottom line. This corrosive salve, this corrosive mixture, can dissolve, eat away the top level of the skin, thus appearing to remove a skin cancer, for example. But as medical experts have pointed out in relation to this, a lot of the cancer can be in the lower layers of the skin, still there. On the surface, it might look like it's worked, but the cancerous condition could still be beneath. And as one doctor put it in relation to this black salve, do-it-yourself is great for things around the home, but not when treating skin cancer. Black salve came to my attention, roughly 10 years ago or so, maybe a bit longer, when I saw the DVD called One Answer to Cancer on sale at Sydney's Mind, Body, Spirit Festival. And the information blurb, One Answer to Cancer. This is a story about two cancer salves. One makes cancer worse and can even kill, yet it is legal. The other has been curing cancers for 2,000 years, yet it is illegal, denounced by big pharma, big government, and big medicine. Why? So they can hang on to their obscene profits. This is vintage conspiratorial thinking. Wouldn't it be wonderful to live in a truly free, harmonious society in which we all have abundant, safe, natural products and medical advice we can trust implicitly? Unfortunately, it isn't possible because our planet has become dominated by evil multinational corporations that have stealthily gained control over governments and media and have thoroughly corrupted our medical system. Goodness, sounds dire, doesn't it? These purveyors of sickness and death sounds like something from a movie, have remained unexposed because history's legendary, quote, crusading journalists, end quote, who once courageously defied establishment wealth and power, are a thing of the past. Oh, freedom of the mainstream press in the 21st century belongs only to those who own one. The internet is now the only medium capable of disseminating truth. This is why we have spent the past 5 years making a feature-length DVD, One Answer to Cancer. And at the end of this blurb, and indeed on the DVD itself, and I do have a copy in the archives, there's a website mentioned, www.oneanswertocancermovie.com. That website is now defunct. So to summarize at this point very quickly, Black Salve is dangerous. It is not recommended to use when you search online. Well, the search return I got top of the page is from the Food and Drug Administration in the United States with the big heading, "Do not use. Black Salve is dangerous and called by many names." Well, this concern is brought about by the catastrophic effects it can have, especially on the face. There are horror pictures online of people's flesh being eaten away by this concoction. And this brings me to some correspondence I received not long after the last episode of the Skeptic Zone went out to the world by Paul Gallagher, who sent me lots of information about the Australian Vaccination Network and findings against them by the Therapeutic Goods Administration when it comes to Black Salve. Because, no shock to anybody, the Australian Vaccination Network were promoting this dangerous substance. So in this week's show notes, I will refer you to the blog post Losing in the Lucky Country, Skeptical Musings of the Denial of Evidence, and a posting by Paul Gallagher, and this was posted on the 25th of September. Black Salve, the Australian Vaccination Network, and the Therapeutic Goods Administration. As the Australian Vaccination Risks Network celebrate 30 years of spreading anti-vaccine and dangerous health advice to unsuspecting Australians, some satisfying memories of yesteryear have come to mind. Foremost is the delightful own goal scored by AVN, Australian Vaccination Network, founder Merrill Dorey when promoting Black Salve, as she bemoaned the Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA, for taking action against the AVN for advertising a DVD which itself promoted Black Salve. Let me explain. It all began way back in 2012 with increasing interest in a fraudulently marketed so-called skin cancer cure, namely a corrosive salve known as an escharotic, being marketed as the near-miraculous Black Salve. A DVD sold by the then Australian Vaccination Network, AVN, titled One Answer to Cancer, was packed with anecdotal testimonies praising Black Salve and criticising Aldara, the medically approved treatment for keratosis and basal cell carcinomas. I blogged about this at the time, and you can catch up here when there's a link. It's indicative of how quickly interest in Black Salve and the dubious DVD was spreading. To see that on the 19th of March 2012, the Therapeutic Goods Administration published a warning about black and red salves in treating cancer. This included, and this is quoting from the warning, the recent use of products marketed as containing Black Salve in Australia has resulted in serious harm to the skin of 3 Australian consumers who used the Black Salves for various skin conditions, including the treatment of skin cancer. It goes on to say all therapeutic goods, including those used for treating cancer, must be included in the register unless exempt. Penalties of up to $5.5 million apply in the illegal importation or supply of therapeutic goods. The TGA was investigating information and a complaint made about supply via the internet. Goes on, the TGA stressed that the problem with corrosive salves is that they quote, essentially burn off layers of the skin and surrounding normal tissue. They can destroy large parts of the skin and underlying tissue and leave significant scarring, end quote. And if you visit this blog post, to give you a warning, there is a graphic image of some poor fellow who applied this salve to his nose. It goes on to say proponents misleadingly call it nature's scalpel. The purpose of One Answer to Cancer was to promote black salve and offer instructions on how to prepare your own batch. In December 2018, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners published a comprehensive article on black salve, its history and use, noting that the main ingredient is a synthetic corrosive. And I'm just abbreviating this post a little bit. It goes on to say the dangers were well documented in 2012 and warnings were abundant. Nonetheless, in the AVN shop, Merrill Dory had included the following blurb with the DVD ad. Quoting from the blurb, 50% of us will face cancer in our own lives at one time or another. We will have to face the choice of how we treat our illness, using toxic drugs or safe, effective, time-tested natural remedies. If you or someone you know is facing this issue, or if you just want to be prepared for any further cancer diagnosis, this will be the best $25 you have ever spent. And now Paul goes on to say the advertisement was in breach of the Therapeutic Goods Act 1989 and numerous sections of the TGA advertising code. The AVN were told to remove the advertisement and publish the notice below. And the notice is very stark and it's red, mostly in red, so it really means business. Retraction. An advertisement promoting illegal therapeutic goods under the name Black Salve, which we published on this website, should not have been published. In publishing the advertisement, we misled and abused the trust of consumers. In the advertisement, we unlawfully made claims that black salve is safe and it can be used as effective treatment for cancers, including skin cancer. We also claimed that cancer medications are harmful and cause cancer and are ineffectual. And there's more to that retraction there. You can read that on the blog. And it says, however, long before this, the TGA informed Merrill Dory that a complaint had been lodged, as is her right. Unsurprisingly, Merrill felt both the complainant and the request of the TGA to remove the offering advertisement was an abuse of her network's rights. On 5 May 2012, which was about 2 weeks after being notified, Merrill gave an interview on Fair Dinkum Radio, a production of Resistance Media. And fair dinkum is an Australian term which means true, real, bona fide, something like that. This was an early freedom fighter production, and the host, Leon Pittard, opened the show announcing the title as The Australian Government's Assault on Health Freedom. For me, says Paul, the highlight of the show was Merrill's interview, which you can access below or download here. So there is an audio clip of Merrill Dory, as Paul says, waxing lyrical about the benefits of black salve.
A treatment that's been used for at least 2,000 years called black salve, and it's a combination of herbs and minerals that is applied topically to cancer, and it's called nature's scalpel. Now, I've used it myself on a cancer that I had on my shoulder, and I've got to tell you, it is like a scalpel. It cut it out in a perfect circle, and it got rid of it completely. So the Australian government several years ago banned the use of black salve on humans, and you could only buy it for animals. As of a couple of weeks ago, you're not even allowed to sell it for animal use. And
after this, Paul lodged a second complaint, which, to cut to the chase, led to the TGA issuing another retraction. Retraction, an advertisement for black salve, which we published on this website, was misleading and an abuse of the trust of consumers and should not have been published. And on it goes. And towards the end, Paul says the TGA published regulatory decisions and announcements and the outcomes of advertising compliance investigations. As members of the public, it's up to us to report harmful products and dodgy advertisements to the TGA. You can report perceived breaches or questionable practices here with a link. There's more information on reporting, what you need to provide, and accessing support to complete forms here with another link. Now, what an important message this is. What an important thing this is. Our friend Ken MacLeod is very active when it comes to reporting dodgy, unsafe medical products as well. But the point is, of course, it's up to all of us to keep our eyes open. I'm always looking around me when I'm out and about, especially if I go to pharmacies or the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, to see if there are any dodgy, unsupported, dangerous claims being made when it comes to therapeutic goods, health goods. And indeed, the first time I came across, as I said before, the first time I came across this One Answer to Cancer, the DVD, was at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival. So I will link to this blog post in the show notes. Again, a word of warning. There is a graphic image of the adverse side effects to this concoction, this black salve. And it really is a classic case of conspiratorial thinking when it comes to so-called natural medicine.
Are monsters from the Shadowlands real? Do strange and mysterious creatures walk amongst us in the dead of night? Should you be afraid? Many people fear what we call cryptids, those animals or entities lost somewhere between myth and magic in the world. My name is Ben Radford, Deputy Editor of Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine, and I'm here to set the record straight. For over a quarter of a century now, I've investigated mysterious creatures around the world. The Chupacabra, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, Lizard Man, you name it, all sorts of weird things. But until now, there's one land that has eluded me. Australia. Yes, the land of the yowie and the bunyip, all sorts of weird, strange, mysterious creatures. Some have 2 legs, some have 4. Who knows what you have out there? I don't know. But I can't wait to meet you all in November at Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, from the 23rd to the 24th in Sydney in November. You can check out all the other amazing speakers and book your tickets at skepticon.org.au. Come and meet me in Sydney, and we'll see how many dragons and monsters we can slay together.
You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello, everybody. This is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada. And today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Erika Englehaupt, and she is a science journalist who has become an author of 2 fantastic books. The first one you would have heard about from Rob Palmer in episode number 817. And the name of that book is Gory Details, Adventures from the Dark Side of Science. And her second book that has just come out is called Go to Hell, A Traveler's Guide to the Underworld. Welcome, Erika.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I've actually seen you give talks at both SciCon and at Skeptical, and you talked about Gory Details and then in the second one, Lady Bits. Those were fascinating.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed them. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun talking to people in the skeptic community. I feel like I've really found some of my people who are interested in some of the same kinds of things that I am.
What's great about your books is you do take a skeptical view of things and do have that tone. And one of my favorite parts of your book was the bit about lady bits, because we really don't talk about women's bodies. I know it has been something in the medical industry that has been ignored for a very long time. And what was so fascinating to me is that it was an Australian who actually helped with that research. Can you expand upon that, please?
Yes. It was actually an Australian urologist. I believe she was one of the first female urologists in Australia. And she basically started doing surgeries on the urinary system. And when she would do surgeries on males, there was, all of the anatomy books and everything laid out exactly where all of the nerves and blood vessels were and allowed you to do the surgery while making sure to preserve sexual function for men, right? Make sure you don't hit a nerve or something.
Yes.
But she found that when she went to do surgery on women, literally that information did not exist. The textbooks did not have the full anatomy for women of not just the reproductive system as we usually call it, but also sexual function.
Right.
And so the anatomy of the clitoris, which is the main sensation body part for women, was really not fully described. There were literally 1800s diagrams that were the best diagrams available that she was working off of. So she decided to take matters into her own hand and do her own dissections and MRI imaging and all of these studies to really lay out exactly the structure of female sexual anatomy. And it's amazing because I think so few of us actually know what this important part of the female body even looks like or what the structure is, because there's only a very small part that's external to the body that people may be familiar with, but that actually extends much deeper into the body and then flares out into these bulbs. And so the whole thing actually looks much more like a big puffy wishbone.
Yes.
Sort of. So I just thought it was so fascinating that it wasn't until the 1990s that she published this full anatomy and even renamed those bulbs that are on the sides of the clitoris structure, because they had been called the bulbs of the vestibule, which is kind of a really weird cryptic name. And she renamed them. No, they're actually part of the clitoris structure. And so she renamed them the bulbs of the clitoris. So this is just really groundbreaking in the sense that, this whole kind of part of the female body had just been mostly ignored by the medical profession for centuries.
Yeah, I was shocked to learn it was 1998 that this changed. And I actually asked a few of my friends, I said, when do you think this research would have come out? And they all said the 50s, or the 60s, the sexual revolution.
Exactly. People think of like the Kinsey report and things like that, like, oh, they must have had all of that then.
Yeah, but they did not.
No, they did not.
We must celebrate Helen O'Connell, who is the urologist in Australia. And you also mentioned in that book, Ben Radford, because you have a section on clowns. How does that fit in with Gory Details?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. I noticed that so many people told me that the things that they had phobias about, the things that they were afraid of, included clowns. And I was like, well, is it really a phobia? Like, what is it? And people would generally say, well, I just think they're creepy. And because I'm interested in the psychology of things that are dark, scary, creepy, I started looking into like, well, what is creepy really? And what makes clowns creepy? Like, why clowns? They're supposed to be happy, fun for kids, kinds of characters. And when I was little, I don't really remember being scared of clowns. I mean, Ronald McDonald was a clown. I don't remember having that kind of fear as a little kid in the 70s. And so what I figured out from people like Ben, who have thought much more about clowns, is that clowns really are kind of a perfect storm of creepiness, because what makes something creepy as opposed to just outright scary is a level of uncertainty. You don't know for sure if something is a threat or not, but something, that little voice in the back of your head is saying something's not right here. And clowns, of course, are very ambiguous. They have this big painted on smile. They look human, but not quite human. They may have really exaggerated features like the giant shoes and things like that. And so they're very easy to make creepy. Yeah. You can very easily take those kinds of not quite human features and say, and make them scary, outright scary. Like, Stephen King's It, which I read as a kid. That was the first time I thought of clowns as creepy.
And it's become quite a trope in TV and movies.
Yeah, exactly. You can take the creepy clown and easily make it totally scary clown.
Mm-hmm.
But even a regular clown, I think you can take that idea and very easily turn it into something creepy, because it's a very basic kind of almost like a fight or flight response that our brain has when we see something that seems potentially threatening, but we're not sure. So you get that prickly feeling like you do when your adrenaline is starting to go up and your fight or flight response is starting to kick in.
Next, what I'd like to talk about in the book, trust me, listeners, this book has so many interesting details. I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg. This is probably, again, a favorite bit. And that is when you ask the question, what do you think is the most murderous mammal?
Yes. And generally, if I ask someone, what do you think would be the most murderous mammal, automatically we think, well, it must be humans.
Yeah, I thought that.
Oh, well, this has to be a little bit of a trick question, right? Because, we're pretty much famous for being murdery, but it's not. We're actually fairly average murdery among primates.
Yeah, in your book, you say we're ranked 30th. I was surprised.
Yeah, among primates, we're kind of, average in our murderousness. So compared to, animals like chimp, gorillas, so forth. And when I say murder, we're talking of, obviously, they don't have like murder statutes in the animal kingdom like we do. But what I'm talking about is killing another of your own species, not for food or as some kind of predation, but just through violence.
Right.
So a fight to the death, basically, counting as animal murder.
Right.
So we're actually not the most murderous by kind of a long shot. And I was fairly surprised to find out that one of my cute favorite animals is actually the most murderous, and that is the adorable meerkat.
Yeah, they're so adorable. How can that be?
They're so cute. I know, but they are vicious.
Well, and particularly the females.
Exactly. And so, again, bucking myths and misconceptions about male versus female, the meerkat female comes in because they are very fiercely protective. They have a hierarchy within their colonies, and females are dominant. And there will be a dominant female in the group. She is the one who is basically allowed to have babies, and a subdominant female could get in trouble for getting pregnant and having babies. She may get into fights. She may be killed. Her babies may be killed. So yes, there is a lot of murder going on in that cute little meerkat colony.
It was shocking. And lastly, for the book, I want to talk a little bit about something that I consider to be a bit of a public service announcement, because I had no idea about this. I had never heard about this, and that is the rat lung parasite. And the fact that a boy died on a dare to eat, I think it was a slug. Is that correct?
Slug, yes. And that was in Australia, wasn't it?
It was in Australia, yes.
And there have been cases in the US as well, and in other countries, of people who have actually died from eating. Now you think, well, who's going to eat a snail or a slug? Well, a kid might on a dare, but also you can get a small snail or slug in a salad on produce that hasn't been washed thoroughly, and accidentally get one that way. And there have been cases where people have had that happen. And then what happens is, so normally this parasite develops into a worm. Normally it would be going through its life cycle in a rat, but if one gets into a human, the parasite will develop into a worm and will do what it would have normally done in a rat and go to the brain. And that's a problem. So here in the US, we've recently heard about brain worms with someone who was running for president of our country, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he'd actually had a brain worm. And when I found that out, I was fascinated. I really wanted to know what species it was.
Yes.
Was it one of these rat lungworms? Those cases are usually fatal, because once you've got a worm in your brain, how do you get it out? I mean, you can try to poison it, but then now you've got poison in your brain, and now you've got a dead worm in your brain. And so it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
for that to happen. But I don't know. There are several possibilities for what species of brainworm, and I have not seen any, they have not released any medical information about what kind of brainworm it was.
We don't know if it's the rat lung parasite or not.
No, it could have been a different one, but that is one of the more, when I say common, it's not very common for this to happen to people, but that is one of the ones that's, pretty well known medically.
So just don't eat slugs or snails.
Yes. Wash your salads really well. Wash that lettuce. I'm paranoid now. I actually saw a tiny slug on a piece of lettuce that I was washing. Made me very nervous. It can happen.
Yeah, and it is rare, but we still want to make sure. It's fairly easy to avoid, as long as we're aware of what we're washing. Yeah. I guess if you're in a restaurant, it might be a little harder.
Yeah, just look at that salad closely.
Look at the salad closely. Well, what a fun time I had with Erika. And it was such an interesting time talking with her about her 2 books that this kind of quickly became a 2-parter. This is what happens when I get interested in a topic. I do recommend reading Gory Details. And don't worry about the book being too gory. You can always skip a chapter if you choose to read it while eating your dinner. Stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about Erika's brand new book called Go to Hell, A Traveler's Guide to the Underworld. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
Now it's time once again to dive back into the digital archives of newspapers, magazines, gazettes, periodicals, journals, tabloids, weeklies, monthlies, yearlies, whatever, digitized and kept for all the world, especially at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, but sometimes we look further afield. Today is a bit of a mixture. Today I'm looking at Trove and also from the microfilm at the State Library of New South Wales. And we'll continue with our little series here of psychic investigations in general, looking into psychic phenomena over the past century or so in those newspapers. But let's start this week with a dive into the Trove, and we end up in the year 1947, as reported here on the 14th of June in Smith's Weekly. And according to Trove here, Smith's Weekly, say that 3 times quickly, was published from 1919 to 1950. Of course, hundreds of newspapers over the decades come and go. But here on page 11 it says, "Are you psychic?" Publication in Smith's recently of unusual psychic experiences related by Mr. L.L. Hall, President of the Psychic Research Society, Sydney, created Australia-wide interest. Readers have sent in similar experiences, strange incidents for which there seem to be no normal explanations. Before the last war, a friend of mine whose wife was sailing out from England told me he had a strange and impressive dream. He had fancied he was on the same ship as his wife, and her cabin had been rifled of jewellery and other valuables. Walking along the ship's corridors, he had been attracted to a cabin with the number 12 on the door. He went inside and saw 2 men with his wife's stolen property. Some days later, he received a cable from his wife stating that her cabin had been robbed. Because his dream had been so real, my friend cabled back suggesting that cabin 12 be searched. The wife was mystified on receiving the suggestion, but took it to the ship's officer, who arranged for a search to be made. The missing valuables were found in cabin 12, and the occupants, 2 men, were arrested. I wonder if any of that story is true. Stay with me. C.R. Darlinghurst, Sydney. A few years ago, I went to board with the Darlinghurst family consisting of a mother and her adult son and daughter. The mother suffered strange turns from time to time which caused her extreme pain, and she had been warned that it was possible she might die from one of them. Shortly after I joined the family, I was alone in the kitchen with the woman when a turn came on her. She lay on the floor moaning and whispering, "Stay with me, mother." I got the strange sensation that there was a third person in the room with us. Over a period of months, the woman took more turns, and every time I was present, I experienced the original sensation. At last I mentioned it to the woman. She said, "That was my mother. Before she died, she said she would never leave me, and when my trouble comes on, she always stands by." That much of my story cannot be proved, but this part can. The son and daughter, wherever they might be when their mother took a turn, were immediately aware of the fact. I went out with the son a good deal, and it was common for him to break off in the middle of a conversation, stiffen slightly as though listening, and then say, "I must go home at once. My mother is ill." Smith's has investigated the following story. The businessman concerned who told the story is a well-known Sydney citizen. One night he dreamed that he went to his office and had just sat down at his desk when the phone rang. He was informed that a business associate had died. Next morning he entered his office and sat down. The phone rang. He answered it and was informed that the business associate had died the previous night. Any readers with experiences in psychic phenomena might communicate them to Smith's. Editor, Smith's Weekly. And this really does remind me of those times I'm on radio when I'm introduced as Richard Saunders the Skeptic, and they invariably will say, "If you've had any strange experience or psychic experiences, why don't you ring up now?" And so you get a stream of interesting stories, and it's up to me on the spot to magically try to debunk them to the satisfaction of all, which of course is a nonsense. It's impossible. So more and more my answer is simply, well, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but it could be XYZ. Now let's see what's written on the 30th of October, 1934, in the pages of the Canberra Times. Psychic Secrets. If there is a mysterious force which manifests itself when a medium goes into a trance, it has eluded the keen eye of infrared cameras. To test the psychic powers of the medium, Rudy Schneider, two British investigators, have made a series of experiments using an infrared beam and also a camera with a movie film sensitive to infrared. The camera, thus equipped, is capable of taking pictures in feeble red light or even the absence of visible light, thus working in conditions of light that mediums usually prefer for their settings. The infrared film caught nothing unusual except the moving of a curtain when a beam of infrared light was used in connection with the apparatus in the tests. There were frequent announcements by the trance personality that the force had entered the ray. Notwithstanding this, the investigators could obtain no evidence of absorption of the beam of infrared light. While in a trance, the medium on several occasions announced that the force had gone into one of a pair of cotton wool lagged boxes. Lagged, cotton wool lagged boxes, and remained there for some 15 minutes, but no change in temperature of the box could be detected. During half an hour, the force could produce no significant difference in the rate of growth of two strains of bacilli, or dormant yeast. The investigators spoke highly of Mr. Schindler's willingness to submit to tests. Some early examples of testing paranormal claims there from 1934. And now let's jump ahead many decades to 1984. 1984 on the 15th of January, as reported here in the pages of the Sydney Morning Herald. Mind Game, the $2 million question. A special report on academic reluctance to investigate the paranormal from Diana Hutchinson in London. And there are two photographs accompanying this picture with no captions. One photograph is of a man placing an object to his forehead with both hands, like a large coin. It's hard to tell what it is. And the other photograph is one man with his hand on the back of somebody's neck and the other hand on their forehead. And he seems to be meditating or concentrating or something like that. The young mother is in the kitchen. It is time to call her 5-year-old daughter for lunch, but she is staying out of sight 2 gardens away. Within minutes, the child has come home. She received the summons just because her mother thought of her. It's the kind of telepathy that happens every day to ordinary people. But how and why does it happen? Strange cases of paranormal are happening every day to entirely normal people. But little research is done into these psychological phenomena. Now, almost $2 million has been made available, and I'll just pause here quickly and say that Diana Hutchinson is reporting hearsay as fact, and implying that these things really do happen and they are paranormal. Now, almost $2 million has been made available in the will of the famous writer Arthur Koestler to discover the answers to questions that baffle us all. The money will go to a university which opens a department to research scientifically all the strange, inexplicable incidents that at some time touch most lives. But although the money has been on offer for some months, no university is hurrying to pick up the research grant. Cambridge and Oxford have been evasive. Others have said no. Prince Charles has urged his own University of Wales to take up the offer at once, but they have not done so. I wonder if that's real. I wonder if that really happened. I wonder if then Prince Charles did that. For the paranormal is equated with years of mumbo-jumbo, Victorian seances round a dining room table, hoaxes, and end-of-pier palmists. Yet there are areas where a century of theatrical magic and mumbo-jumbo not only could, but should be stripped away by laboratory-controlled methods. In Oxford, although not part of the university, the Institute for Psychological Research is a charity which has started work on several of these dark areas. It is run by Celia Green, an Oxford MA, and B. Litt, who specialises in states of consciousness, and there are 4 graduate researchers who have already published scientific papers on lucid dreams, the state where people watch themselves dreaming and can direct what's happening, a state of mind reported by thousands of people. Now I might pause here to say, over the years, you're probably the same yourself. Over the years, every now and then you will realize that what's happening around you is a dream and you're in a dream, and sometimes you can direct the dream or interact more with the dream. But for my part, at least, they are very rare indeed. Researcher Charles McCreery. I am not surprised that no university is rushing to spend this money. How can they set up a professorship when they have nothing to teach? No scientific data, nobody who has ever knuckled down and devoted resources to making real progress? With so much of the inexplicable left unexplained, surely scientific names and reputations are bound to be made. But could we live without the myths, the legends, and the ghost stories of centuries of superstition? Australia is not without its share of ghosts, ghouls, and ghastlies. The daily papers are peppered with reports of hauntings and evil spirits. It's sensational stuff, but there is an academic side to paranormal in Australia. Paranormal communication courses and research are now being carried out at 3 Australian universities: Murdoch in Perth, New England, and the University of Tasmania. Professor John Frodsham, who runs the paranormal psychology course at Murdoch University, said, "I've seen a lot of strange things, but the most important thing with our research is to maintain a healthy skepticism." Professor Frodsham believes parapsychology will become the science of the 21st century. "My grandfather would never have conceived that a glass-fronted box would show moving pictures. Yet, in the next century, the stage we are at now with research will seem very rough and naive," he said. Well, in a strange way, he has a point. Dr. Harvey Irwin, who runs the parapsychology course at New England University, agrees and added that paranormal research in Australia was on par with the rest of the world. "I'm sure there are scientific explanations for paranormal phenomena, but we haven't found the answers yet." Well, I'm sure there are scientific explanations for paranormal phenomena. Well, I must say it's a case of let's wait until we establish that there are paranormal phenomena at all before we worry about the scientific explanation. So there we are. Some more stories of the paranormal, the researching, the investigation into paranormal in Australian history and other bits of the world. But you too, oh yes, you too, and I don't need to be psychic to know this. You too can find out all sorts of mysterious things when you visit Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Type in your search because you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. Thank you to all those wonderful people who subscribe or in other ways support the Skeptic Zone. A shout out to my good friend Daryl Cahoon and other people who wish to remain, behind the scenes, who actually do support the Skeptic Zone, and those people who contribute via PayPal or Patreon via skepticzone.tv. Without you, there would be no show. Coming up next week, Adrienne Hill has part 2 of her interview with Erika Englehaupt, and we look at some of the exploits of Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini, a very interesting series of articles I discovered about Houdini and his exposing of mediums. I want to say his exposing of fake mediums, but it's sort of a redundancy. Is that the word I'm looking for? Tautology? No, not quite. Well, since it's never been established that mediums can do what they claim, I guess we can say every medium is a fake, which is different from being a fraud, in my way of thinking. Anyway, we might cover that topic another time. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Just go straight to
All right.
Start again.
Take two. This is, and here we are at Skeptics in the Pub. The evening is winding up, but we go. Thank you, Tim Mendham. We're going to do the dice game. This is where the people here in the pub and Tim Mendham can use their psychic predicting power and see if they can determine what this D10 will come up with. Lara Benham, Skeptic Zone fans know you from dice games, particularly.
Yeah, I have had that.
You can be our dice roller tonight. But we can guess, I'm going to guess a 3. What are you going to guess?
How many sides?
10.
I'm going to go with a 2.
A 2?
Writing these down.
All right. So, Lara, Richard, Tim, Khan, and your name is? Paul, thank you. Paul. So Lara predicts a 2.
It's 0 to 9, isn't it?
No.
Well, it's 1 to 10.
On the numbers that are on there. Yes.
Pennant. Okay. Richard predicts 5
For Susan.
for Susan. Tim predicts
9.
9. Khan? 5. Paul?
Go for a 4.
4. All right. Lara, do the honours.
It was an 8.
8.
Nobody. But I think you'll find that Richard was in fact predicting Khan's prediction.
Yes, I was predicting Khan's prediction. Lara, what are you going to predict this time? 1. Richard? 2. Khan, Tim?
9.
9. Khan? 5. Paul? 6. 5.
Well done.
Wins.
So we have a winner. One winner. Khan. Okay, last round. Here we go. Lara.
5.
A bit late, but anyway. Richard. 9. Tim.
1.
1. Khan. 5. 5. Well, he's consistent. Paul.
I'm going to go 10.
10. A brave man.
Very brave because there is no 10 on it.
Well.
8.
8. We didn't do very... 1. Khan's the only winner. Tonight's winning numbers are 8, 5, and 8.